In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the American Southwest, where the sun scorched the earth into cracked clay and the wind whispered secrets, through canyons carved by time, Elias Hawthorne had carved out a life of deliberate isolation. His ranch, nestled in a remote valley bordered by jagged mesas and endless fence lines of barbed wire, was a testament to his resolve to sever ties with the world. For long years, Elias had spoken to no one, but the echoes of his own voice bouncing off the rock walls. No visitors dared the treacherous two-day trek from the nearest town, a dusty outpost called Dust Creek, through bandit-infested trails and flash-flood gullies. Yet, on this blistering afternoon in the summer of 1887, the impossible unfolded before his eyes. From his weathered porch, Elias gripped the railing with calloused hands that hadn't felt human touch since he'd buried his past. 6 young women knelt in the dirt just beyond his gate, their faces smeared with grime and streaked with tears that cut clean lines through the dust. Their dresses, once perhaps modest and fitting for frontier life, were now tattered rags clinging to their frail forms. The youngest looked no older than 16, her blonde hair matted and her eyes wide with a fear that spoke of horrors beyond her years. The oldest might have been 26, her dark hair tied back in a hasty knot, revealing a bruise blooming across her cheek like a storm cloud. They knelt like supplicants at an altar, but Elias's ranch was no sanctuary, it was his prison, self-imposed and impenetrable. His throat tightened, dry as the parched soil underfoot. For years without uttering a word to another soul had turned his voice into a rusty hinge, creaking only in solitary mutterings to his horse or the cattle that dotted his land. He'd chosen this life after the world had taken everything from him, cutting every thread that connected him to humanity. The ranch was his fortress, stocked with enough provisions to last through brutal winters and scorching summers. Far from the corruption of townsfolk and the lawmen who twisted justice for profit, no one came here by chance. The path was too perilous, the rewards too scant. But these women had arrived, defying logic and stirring something long dormant in his chest. The one with raven black hair lifted her head first, her hazel eyes locking onto his with a desperation that mirrored ghosts from his past ghosts. He'd spent years exercising through sheer willpower. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse rasp escaped her parched lips, cracked and bleeding from days under the relentless sun. Her face was gaunt, hollowed by starvation and exhaustion, as if she'd crossed hell itself to reach this forsaken place. The others remained bowed, their shoulders heaving with silent sobs or labored breaths. Whatever ordeal had driven them here, it had stripped them of dignity and strength, leaving only raw survival. Elias felt the foundations of his solitude shake. Every fiber of his being urged him to turn away, to retreat into the dim coolness of his cabin and bolt the door against this intrusion. Helping others had once cost him dearly, trust shattered, love lost, pain that echoed eternally. Solitude was safe, it demanded nothing, risked nothing. He'd learned that involvement bred only suffering, that the world beyond his fences was a viper's nest of betrayal and violence. But as the raven-haired woman struggled to rise, swaying like a reed in the wind, a flicker ignited in his hardened heart, a remnant of compassion he'd thought extinguished. It wasn't pity that moved him, it was recognition. In her eyes, he saw the same haunted look that had stared back from his mirror in the early days of his exile. She took a tentative step forward, her bare feet leaving bloody prints in the dust. Her voice, when it finally came, was faint but piercing, carried on the hot breeze. "Please, sir, we have no place left to turn. They're coming for us." The words hung in the air like a noose, tightening around Elias's resolve. He remained silent, his grip on the railing turning his knuckles white. Memories flooded unbidden. Another woman, another plea, another moment when he'd hesitated and paid the ultimate price. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding with the effort to suppress the rising tide of emotion. "You shouldn't be here," he finally growled, his voice gravelly from disuse, sounding foreign even to his own ears. But even as he spoke, his eyes catalogued the evidence of their suffering, shredded hems of their dresses, suggesting forceful grabs, the dark stains that could be mud or something far worse. The way they clutched at each other for support. The raven-haired woman, who would later introduce herself as Amelia, pressed on, her hand instinctively moving to her side where a makeshift bandage seeped with fresh crimson. "They ambushed our wagon 4 days ago," she whispered, her voice gaining fragile strength. "Killed our escort, a kind old prospector who was guiding us west for honest work. Said we'd be cooks and laundresses in a mining camp. But they had other plans." Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy, stirring a cold fury in Elias's gut. He scanned the horizon, the valley's isolation suddenly feeling like a trap rather than a shield. The border to safer territories lay beyond a week's brutal journey, through lands riddled with outlaws and unforgiving nature. These women weren't mere wanderers. They were prey, hunted by forces that thrived on human misery. Amelia staggered another step, her face paling as blood trickled down her dress. The sight twisted something deep within him. She was fading fast, and the others weren't far behind. Dehydration had hollowed their cheeks, and fever glazed the eyes of the youngest, a girl with freckles and a cough that rattled like dry leaves. Elias's mind raced through calculations honed by years of survival. Send them away, and they'd perish in the wilderness, their bodies picked clean by coyotes. Offer shelter, and whatever pursued them would descend upon his ranch like locusts. He'd built this life to avoid such dilemmas, to escape the moral quagmires that had once destroyed him. But as Amelia collapsed to one knee, her blood staining the earth, the decision crystallized against his will. He couldn't watch them denat when his hands, idle for so long, could intervene. Before reason could reclaim him, Elias descended the porch steps, his boots kicking up dust clouds. Inside, he barked, the command surprising even himself. The women exchanged wary glances but moved, supporting each other with what little strength remained. He scooped up the youngest, her slight frame burning with fever, lighter than a bale of hay. When had he last held someone so vulnerable? The memory scorched him a flash of his late wife, Elizabeth. In her final moments, but he pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. The cabin, a sturdy one-room structure of adobe and timber, had been his world entire. Its sparse furnishings, a single cot, a rough-hewn table, a stove fed by scavenged wood, felt cramped as the women filed in, collapsing onto the floor or leaning against walls. Amelia slumped near the window, her breathing shallow, while the others tended to her with torn strips from their own dresses. Elias barricaded the door, his hands moving with mechanical efficiency, checking his old Winchester rifle that hung above the mantel. It had gathered dust, but the feel of it grounded him. "Who are they?" he demanded, his voice low to avoid carrying outside. Amelia met his gaze, her hazel eyes fierce despite the pain. "Traffickers," she rasped. "They pose as recruiters for frontier jobs promising steady pay for women like us. Down on our luck after the war. But it's a lie. They sell us to the highest bidder in the territories, where law is just a word." She gestured to the bruises on her neck, finger-shaped marks that spoke of strangled protests. The revelation ignited a spark of outrage in Elias. He'd heard whispers of such operations in his old life, networks of men who traded in flesh under the guise of legality. As he peered through a shuttered window, a distant rumble reached his ear-shoe-feets, faint but unmistakable, approaching from the east. Multiple riders, moving with purpose across the hardpan. Amelia heard it too, her face draining of color. "That's them," she whispered, terror etching lines deeper into her features. "They've tracked us. God help us." Elias's pulse quickened, the sanctuary he'd nurtured for years now a potential battlefield. The dust cloud on the horizon grew, resolving into silhouettes of mounted men. By his count armed and determined. Hiding the women in the root cellar beneath the floorboards crossed his mind. But if these pursuers were as ruthless as Amelia described, they'd tear the place apart. Negotiation. Unlikely. Men who hunted humans rarely parleyed. The riders crested a nearby ridge, slowing as they surveyed the ranch. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a glint of metal on his chest, a badge set tall in the saddle, exuding authority twisted by malice. Elias stepped outside, rifle cradled in his arms, the sun casting his shadow long across the yard. The air thickened with tension, the kind that precedes violence in the untamed West. The leader dismounted first, his boots thudding against the earth like judgments. "Afternoon, stranger," he called, his voice smooth but laced with threat. "Name's Marshal Harlan Voss. We're on the trail of some wayward female Essex of Emwo absconded with property that ain't theirs. You seen any such party pass through? Elias's grip tightened on the rifle. A marshal? That complicated matters exponentially. Corruption in frontier law was rampant. Badges bought and sold like cattle. Haven't seen a soul, he replied evenly, his isolation-honed instinct screaming caution. This land's private. Best you move on. Voss chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, as his men fanned out, hands hovering near holsters. Private or not, federal business takes precedence. Mind if we poke around? Runaways can be sly, hiding in barns or cellars. His eyes scanned the cabin, predatory and knowing. Inside, Elias heard a muffled gasponi of the women, perhaps the feverish girl, stifling pain. The sound was minute, but in the still valley, it might as well have been a shout. Voss's head cocked, a wolf scenting blood. Hear that? Sounds like companies keeping secrets. The standoff teetered on the brink. Elias knew the mathematics. 1 man against 7 professionals, with innocence in the line of fire. But turning back now meant condemning the women to fates worse than death chains, abuse, oblivion. As Voss advanced, hand on his revolver, Elias raised his rifle, the barrel steady. I said move on. Gunfire seemed inevitable, the air crackling with impending doom. But in that charged moment, Amelia's voice filtered through the cabin door. Weak yet defiant. He's lying, Elias. That marshal. He's the one who runs the ring. Sold us like livestock. The revelation hung, explosive. Voss's facade cracked, rage flickering in his eyes. You harboring fugitives, rancher? That's a hanging offense. Elias's mind whirled help them and invite destruction, or betray them and live with fresh blood on his conscience. The choice loomed, echoing his past failures, as the riders closed in. But as tensions peaked, a deeper secret surfaced. Amelia, pressing against the doorframe for support, whispered words that shattered Elias's world. Harlan Voss. He's the man who took your wife, Elizabeth. I was there when it happened. The name Voss triggered a cascade of buried agony. 4 years ago, in a homestead near Willow Bend, Voss had come demanding protection fees Elias couldn't pay. When refused, he'd taken Elizabeth as collateral, laughing at Elias's pleas. She'd vanished into the night, her fate a tormenting mystery that drove Elias into exile. Amelia continued, her voice a lifeline amid the storm. She fought him, Elias. Broke his nose before they subdued her. She believed you'd come for her, he'd cursing his name, not yours. Voss's laughter boomed, confirming the horror. Thaddeus Bell? No, Elias Hawthorne, the coward who ran. Fancy meeting you here. History repeats, don't it? Rage surged, pure and incinerating. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger, the world narrowing to the man who'd stolen his life. But before the shot rang out, chaos erupted. One of Voss's men fired a warning shot, splintering the porch post. The women inside scrambled, grabbing makeshift weapons from Elias's stores. The battle ignited, bullets whizzing as Elias dove for cover. Amelia, despite her wound, fired a pistol through the window, dropping a rider. The others joined, their desperation forging them into warriors. Voss bellowed orders, his men advancing with lethal intent. In the frenzy, Elias fell to assailants, his marksmanship undimmed by years of peace. But numbers overwhelmed. A bullet grazed his arm, blood flowing hot. As Voss charged the door, Elias met him head-on, tackling the marshal in a brutal grapple. Fists flew, old grudges fueling the fight. You took everything, Elias roared, landing a blow that cracked Voss's jaw. The marshal countered with a knife, slashing Elias's side. The women poured out, overwhelming the remaining men in a hail of gunfire and improvised attacks. One girl wielded a frying pan like a club. Another reloaded rifles with steady hands. As dust settled, bodies littered the yard. Voss, wounded but alive, crawled for his horse. Elias stood over him, rifle aimed. For Elizabeth, he said, pulling the trigger. Silence returned, broken only by labored breaths. The women tended wounds, their bond forged in blood. Amelia approached Elias, her eyes soft. You fought this time. She'd be proud. But victory was bittersweet. The law would come. Questions asked. Elias looked at his ranchance, a haven, now a graveyard. We can't stay, he said. North to new territories. Start fresh. 6 months later, in a budding town called Heaven's Rest, a schoolhouse rose, built by Elias's hands. The women taught, healing through purpose. Amelia and Elias wed under blooming saguaros, her ring a symbol of redeemed love. The youngest, Lily, thrived, her fever a distant memory. Evenings brought peace. Elias hearing Elizabeth's whisper in the wind, approval for the man he'd become. Yet, as the sun set on their new life, questions lingered. Was violence the only answer to injustice? Could one man truly atone? Yet, even as the wildflowers wilted under the relentless advance of summer in Heaven's Rest, and Elias Hawthorne settled into a rhythm of married life with Amelia, the shadows of old sins began to lengthen across their newfound peace, whispering that some debts to the past could never be fully paid. The town, a burgeoning outpost in the northern territories where the Rockies met the plains, had embraced the 6 women as beacons of progress teachers, who brought letters and numbers to children whose parents scratched livings from mines and farms. Elias, with his strong back and skilled hands, had become something of a local hero, not for his past exploits, but for the sturdy buildings he erected, the schoolhouse first, then a community hall where folks gathered for dances and debates. But beneath the surface calm, Elias felt an unease, like the distant rumble of thunder on a clear day. 4 years of solitude had sharpened his instincts, and he sensed that the death of Marshal Harlan Voss had not severed the serpent's head, but merely angered its body. Amelia noticed it too, in the way Elias would pause at windows during supper, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting riders to materialize from the dust. Their home, a modest cabin on the town's edge with a view of the schoolyard, was filled with the warmth of shared meals and quiet conversation stories of Amelia's life, before the nightmare of Elias's regrets over Elizabeth. The other woman, Lily, the once feverish girl now blooming into a confident young teacher, Sophia, with her sharp wit and skill in arithmetic, Beatrice, who taught history with a passion born of survival, Clara not to be confused with any past echoes, the quiet one who handled the sciences, and Margaret, whose lessons in literature stirred soulsheds scattered into boarding houses or small homes, forming a tight-knit circle that supported one another like family. Yet, whispers reached them, tales from travelers of a syndicate in the South, remnants of Voss's operation, seeking vengeance for their fallen leader. It started subtly, 6 months after the shootout at Elias's old ranch. A stranger rode into Heaven's Rest, a lean man with a scarred face and eyes like chipped flint, claiming to be a cattle buyer from Dust Creek. He lingered at the saloon, asking questions about the new teachers, where they'd come from, how they'd arrived so suddenly. Elias, working on reinforcing the schoolhouse roof against winter snows, overheard the barkeep relaying the gossip. "Them ladies came with that Hawthorne fella. Good folk, mind you. Turned this place civilized." The stranger nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, Elias confided in Amelia as they lay in bed, the lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. "He's scouting," Elias murmured, his arm around her waist. "Voss had partners. They won't let his death slide." Amelia turned to him, her hazel eyes steady in the dim light. "We've built something here, Elias. We fight if we must, but we don't run." Her words echoed the resolve she'd shown in the cabin, shotgun in hand, but now laced with the weariness of someone who'd already escaped hell once. The next day, the stranger vanished, but not before posting a notice on the town board, a reward poster, faded and crumpled, offering gold for information on 6 runaway indentured servants, last seen near the southern border. The descriptions matched the women vaguely enough to stir suspicion, but not outright accusation. Townsfolk murmured, some recalling the women's rival with Elias, others dismissing it as old news from lawless lands. Tension simmered as autumn leaves turned gold. Elias took precautions, teaching the women basic marksmanship in the woods behind the school, stocking the cabin with ammunition, even enlisting the sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Harlan, ironically sharing a name with the fallen foe, though no relation to keep watch. Sheriff Harlan, with his mustache like broom bristles and a limp from an Indian skirmish, was sympathetic. "Heard about them traffickers down south, scum of the earth. If trouble comes, Heaven's Rest stands with you." But Elias knew better. Small towns were fickle, loyalty swayed by fear or greed. The first real threat materialized on a crisp October morning. Lily, now 17 and teaching the youngest pupils their ABCs, found a note tacked to the schoolhouse door. "We know what you are. Voss sends regards from the grave." The paper was stained with what looked like blood, though it turned out to be red ink. Panic rippled through the group. Beatrice, the historian among them, gathered them in the community hall that evening. "This isn't just revenge," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Voss was part of a bigger ring, bankers in the city's funding it. Lawman on the take. Killing him poked the hornet's nest. Elias paced the room, his boots thudding on the pine floor he'd laid himself. "We need to trace this back. Find out who's leading them now." Amelia nodded, but her face paled. She'd been feeling unwell lately, a secret she kept until later morning sickness. The promise of new life amid peril. The group debated late into the night. Flee north to Canada, where abolitionist networks could hide them, or stand ground, rally the town. Moral quandaries arose. Did they endanger innocence by staying? Was violence inevitable, or could justice prevail through law? Sophia, the arithmetician, argued for calculation. "We outnumber them in spirit, but they have resources. We need allies." As winter's chill descended, blanketing heaven's rest in snow that muffled sounds and hid tracks, the attacks escalated. A barn on the town's outskirts burned, owned by a farmer who'd spoken in defense of the teachers. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Association brought fire. Then Margaret, the literature teacher, was accosted on her way home from evening classes. Two masked men dragged her into an alley, demanding, "Where's the rest of you whores? Boss wants his property back." She fought, scratching one's face, screaming until townsfolk intervened. The assailants fled, but Margaret bore bruises that mirrored her past traumas. Elias's rage boiled over. He rode out at dawn, tracking the men through fresh snow to a campsite 10 miles east, a makeshift camp with fur riders. Their horses branded with a familiar mark, a coiled snake, Voss's insignia. He watched from a ridge, rifle scoped, debating, strike first, eliminate the threat, or return for reinforcements. The choice echoed his past: preemptive violence versus restraint. In the end, he chose reconnaissance, slipping close enough to overhear names. The leader, a burly man called Donovan Kane, barked orders. "The syndicate wants those women alive. Examples to be made. And that rancher Hawthorne? He's the one who killed Voss. His head fetches double." Returning to town, Elias convened the group and Sheriff Harlan. "It's Kane," he said, sketching a map on the table. "Voss's second in command. He's got backing from up high, maybe even territorial governors turning a blind eye for kickbacks." The revelation sparked debate. Was the system so corrupt that fighting meant war against authority? Clara, the science teacher, proposed a clever trap: use chemicals from her lessons to create smoke bombs for ambush. But Amelia, hand on her belly, urged caution. "We're building lives here. A child on the way. Do we risk everything?" The moral tension peaked during a town meeting. Elias addressed the crowd in the hall, his voice steady. "These women came seeking refuge. They've given your children education, hope. Now shadows hunt them. Will heaven's rest stand, or fold to injustice?" Opinions divided. Some farmers, fearing reprisals, advocated expulsion. Miners, hardened by labor disputes, pledged arms. A heated argument erupted. One elder decried violence as sinful, while a young blacksmith countered, "Injustice unchecked breeds more evil." Sometimes a man's gotta fight. As snowstorms raged, Kane's men struck again. They raided the schoolhouse at midnight, shattering windows and scattering books like confetti. Lily, staying late to grade papers, hid under a desk, heart pounding as boots thudded past. They left a message painted on the wall: "Surrender or burn." The town rallied somewhat. Volunteers patrolled, but fear gnawed. Elias, sleepless, patrolled alone, memories of Elizabeth fueling his vigil. One night, he confronted a scout on the outskirts, disarming him in a fierce tussle. The man spat defiance. "Kane's coming with 20 men. You'll all pay." The climax built toward Christmas Eve. Word came via a sympathetic telegraph operator. Kane's force approached, 30 strong, armed with Winchesters and dynamite. Elias fortified the town barricades from wagons, positions on rooftops. The women, refusing to hide, took roles, Sophia calculated trajectories for sharpshooters. Beatrice organized supplies, Margaret inspired with tales of revolutionary heroes. The battle dawned with a blizzard's fury. Cain's riders charged through swirling snow, gunfire cracking like thunder. Elias, atop the community hall, picked off flankers, his shots precise. Amelia, from a window, fired a revolver, protecting the school where children sheltered. Chaos-rened bullets ricocheting, men falling in crimson snow. Sheriff Harlan took a hit but fought on, bellowing orders. In the melee, Elias faced Cain amid the storm. The burly leader, recognizing him, sneered, "You killed my partner. Now I take your woman, like Voss took yours." Rage blinded Elias. They clashed in hand to hand, knives flashing. Cain's blade nicked Elias's shoulder, but Elias's fist connected, staggering him. As Cain raised his gun, Amelia's shot from afar felled him, his body crumpling into the drift. The remaining attackers, leaderless, fled into the whiteout, pursued by townsfolk. Victory came at cost 3 dead, including a minor friend, wounds aplenty. But heaven's rest held, bonds forged in blood. As spring thawed the land, the town rebuilt stronger. Amelia gave birth to a son, named after Elizabeth's father, symbolizing continuity. Yet, rumors persisted. The syndicate's roots ran deeper, to eastern financiers. Elias pondered, had they merely delayed the inevitable? Yet, as the seasons turned once more in heaven's rest, with Amelia's son little Edward, named in quiet homage to a lost love's lineage taking his first wobbly steps across the cabin floor, under the watchful eyes of his extended family of survivors, the persistent rumors of deeper corruption began to manifest in ways that would force Elias and his companions into a confrontation with the very heart of the evil. They had fought so hard to escape. The town had flourished in the year since the Blizzard battle, its population swelling with homesteaders drawn by tales of resilience against outlaws. The schoolhouse buzzed with children's laughter. The community hall hosted weddings and harvest festivals, and Elias's carpentry business thrived, building homes that symbolized stability in a land still wild at its edges. But peace, Elias knew from bitter experience, was often the calm before a greater storm. And the syndicate's tendrils rooted not just in frontier thugs like Voss and Cain, but in the polished boardrooms of Eastern capitalists where coiling tighter. It began with a letter, delivered by a stagecoach driver on a rainy spring afternoon in 1889. The envelope, sealed with wax bearing an unfamiliar crested golden eagle clutching a bundle of arrows, was addressed to the teachers of Heaven's Rest. Amelia opened it at the kitchen table, her hands steady despite the instinctive chill that ran down her spine. The words, penned in elegant script, were deceptively cordial. "Esteemed ladies, your contributions to education in the territories are commendable. However, certain obligations remain unresolved. Indentured contracts, duly signed, demand fulfillment. A representative will arrive to discuss terms. Failure to comply invites legal intervention. Regards, Cornelius Blackwood, ESQ, Blackwood Enterprises, Philadelphia." Enclosed was a faded document forged, no doubt listing the women's names under indentured servants bound to labor in mining camps, owned by Blackwood's conglomerate. Elias read it over her shoulder, his face darkening like gathering clouds. "Blackwood," he muttered, the name stirring vague recollections from his pre-exile days. "He's no small-time operator. Owns half the railroads west of the Mississippi, funds politicians in Washington. If he's Voss's backer, this goes beyond badges and bullets, it's boardrooms and bribes." The group convened that evening in the schoolhouse, lanterns casting long shadows on maps and chalkboards. Lily, now 18 and a master teacher in her own right, paced with youthful fire, "We burn it. Pretend it never came." But Sophia, ever the calculator, shook her head. "Ignorance won't shield us. Blackwood's got lawyers, judges in his pocket. He'll send Pinkerton's next detectives, who sniff out secrets like bloodhounds." Debate raged into the night, moral fissures cracking open. Beatrice, drawing from her historical knowledge, argued, "This is bigger than us. Slavery's ghost in new clothes scorporate chains. If we run, we abandon the town. If we fight legally, we expose our pasts." Margaret, the storyteller, wove tales of uprisings. "Remember Shay's rebellion? Farmers against bankers. We could rally Aliasunians in the mines, reformers back east. Clara, practical as always. Proposed investigation. We need proof. Blackwood's ledgers, witnesses. Turn the law against him. Amelia, cradling Edward, look to Elias. We've built a home. For our son, we end this permanently. Elias, haunted by echoes of Elizabeth's fate taken not just by Voss, but by the system that empowered Himduc. Eyed on action. I'll go east, he declared. Infiltrate, gather evidence. You all fortify here. The choice sparked contention. Was it suicide, leaving family vulnerable, or necessary heroism? Sheriff Harlan, nursing a pipe by the fire, offered, "Take my deputy, young Thompson." And letters of introduction only got kin in Chicago. The women protested Elias going alone. But he insisted, one man slips through shadows easier. Besides, I've ghosts to lay. Preparations consumed weeks. Elias pored over maps, practicing accents to blend in urban crowds. Amelia sewed hidden pockets into his coat for documents, her stitches precise despite tears. The town, sensing trouble, divided. Some merchants, fearing economic backlash from Blackwood's empire, whispered against the teachers. Others, miners who'd suffered under corporate whips, pledged secrecy and supplies. A moral quandary emerged at a town meeting. Do we harbor fugitives if it costs our livelihoods? One shopkeeper asked. A miner countered, ain't fugitives, they are victims. Standing by means complicity in evil. Elias addressed them. Justice ain't free, but cowardice costs souls. He departed at dawn, horseback to the railhead. Then trains eastward, a journey through prairies turning to factories. The West's raw freedom yielding to industrial might. In Chicago, he met Harlan's kin, a union organizer named Fitzpatrick, who confirmed Blackwood's rot. He funds traffickers for cheap labor. Voss was his frontier enforcer. Got warehouses full of ledgers in Philadelphia. Disguised as a laborer, Elias infiltrated a Blackwood rail yard, eavesdropping on overseers boasting of imports from the territory escode for kidnapped women. Tension built as he dodged patrols, moral dilemmas surfacing. Steal documents and risk workers' jobs or observe passively. In Philadelphia, the city's bustle overwhelmed Doubleton's streets, towering buildings, crowds indifferent to suffering, posing as an investor's aid. Elias gained entry to Blackwood's offices via Fitzpatrick's forged credentials. The opulence shocked, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, while out west, lives shattered for profit. He befriended a clerk, Elias Green, a coincidental name that felt fateful, who confided over whiskey, Blackwood's dirty, ships women like cargo. Got a safe with contracts fakes, mostly. Green, burdened by conscience, agreed to help. My sister's in a mill. Can't abide this. The heist unfolded in midnight shadows. Elias, heart pounding, cracked the safe using skills from his rancher days, picking locks on rustled cattle pens. Inside, ledgers detailing payments to Voss and Kane, lists of acquisitions matching the women's descriptions, even telegrams ordering retrieval after the ranch shootout. But alarms trigger Edwards swarmed. Elias fought his way out, pistol barking in narrow halls, Green covering with a ledger as shield. A bullet winged Elias's leg, but he escaped into alleys, documents clutched tight. Back west, peril mounted. Blackwood's representative arrived in Heaven's Rest, a slick lawyer named Whitaker. Backed by Pinkerton agents, he demanded the women's surrender at a public hearing. These ladies owe debts. Law's clear. Amelia, leading the defense, presented forged histories. But Whitaker sneered. Fugitives, evidence en route. The town teeter violence loomed as agents harassed, burning a sympathetic farmer's crop. Moral debates intensified. Preempt attack or wait for proof? Sophia calculated odds. They're 10, we're 50 armed. But legality matters. Elias's return coincided with crisis. Limping into town under night's cover, he burst into the hall where Whitaker held court. Here's your evidence, Elias thundered, slamming ledgers down. Blackwood's empire built on blood. Chaosy reptitogens drew guns. Townsfolk rose. Gunfire shattered windows. Elias dove behind benches, returning fire. Amelia shielded Edward, pistol in hand. Sheriff Harlan felled to Pinkerton's, Lily, from the balcony, sniped with deadly aim. In the fray, Whitaker lunged for the ledgers, but Elias tackled him, fists flying in a brutal reckoning. For Elizabeth, for all of them, Elias growled, subduing the lawyer. The battle spilled outside, agents outnumbered and fleeing. Whitaker, captured, confessed under duress, Blackwood's coming himself with federal troops if needed. The final confrontation brewed as summer heat baked the land. Word spread via telegraph, Blackwood en route by private train, armed escort of mercenaries. Heaven's Rest prepared barricades, alliances with neighboring towns. Even telegrams to Eastern reformers exposing the scandal. Elias, bandaged but unbowed, addressed allies, "This ain't just our fight. It's against the machine that chews people up for gold." Doubts rose, negotiate with Blackwood for amnesty, or risk annihilation. A miner argued, talk's weakness. Beatrice countered, words with proof can topple empires. Blackwood arrived at the rail siding, a portly man in tailored suits, flanked by 50 guns. He demanded parley in the community hall. Elias, Amelia by his side, faced him. "Your game's up. Ledgers prove trafficking." Blackwood chuckled, "Proof? I'll bury it in courts. Surrender the women, or this town burns." Tension peaked. Delia's hand hovered near his holster. Moral crux, kill him and become outlaws, or expose publicly. Amelia intervened. "We sent copies east. Newspapers have them. Harper's Weekly runs the story tomorrow." Blackwood pulled reputation his true vulnerability. As mercenaries shifted uneasily, a ride arrived, federal marshals, uncorrupted ones, summoned by reformers. Arrest warrants for Blackwood trafficking, bribery. Pandemonium. Mercenaries turned on Blackwood for pay, gunfire sporadic. Elias shielded Amelia as bullets flew. In the melee, Blackwood drew a derringer, aiming at Elias. "You ruined me." But green. The clerk turned ally, rived with Union men, disarming him. Blackwood fell, not to lead but to justice hauled away in chains. Victory dawned clear. The syndicate crumbled, exposures rippling East congressional hearings. Reforms curbing corporate excess. Heaven's Rest became a symbol, the women heroes in suffrage circles. Elias and Amelia expanded their family, Edward gaining siblings. The group thrived. Lily married a reformer. Sophia published exposes, others mentored nationwide. Years later, Elias sat on his porch, watching sunsets, peace earned through fire. The West tamed not by guns alone, but by unyielding justice. Now, dear reader, what do you think? In the comments below, share your thoughts on the themes of violence and injustice in life. Would you stand and fight against overwhelming odds, even if it meant risking everything? Or seek negotiation and legal paths first? Take a stance. Express your views on whether violence is ever justified in the face of systemic evil, and how individuals can combat such injustices today. Your perspectives could spark meaningful discussions.